Hello, it's Martin from Wisely Automotive. We are back with yet another preparation video, but this time around we are not working on a typical car which we would buy in, because this is actually my personal car, but when I joined Wisely I'm going to move to the company car scheme, so I don't really see a point in keeping my own car. As usual, let's start with the exterior walk around of the car to check for any damage. First things first, I don't know how difficult this will be to spot on camera, but there are these hairline scratches or scuffs on the front bumper. We will try to polish them out and see whether that does the trick or whether we will need to repaint the piece. We try to stick to factory paint because, especially in a case like this, it means that if this area is getting painted, it needs to be properly blended into this section and into the front wing. Moving on, this wheel is pretty scuff free, so not much to see here. The gaiters, I already know that they are pretty destroyed, so they definitely will need to be swapped out, but we will look at them in more detail on the ramp. The side panels are looking quite good, no dents or anything like that. You can tell the car has been sitting in storage for a while from all these cobwebs. Moving to the back, the eDrive badge has lost all of the black paint, but that's fine, we will leave it silver as is. And when we open the boot, this is the very frequent issue on i3s. So this cord on the parcel shelf is totally fine, but the other side has snapped, so the parcel shelf will need to be replaced, and it's quite a pricey part from BMW. And as usual, underneath, all the dirt on the rear bumper are hiding quite a few scratches from taking things in and out of the boot. For the age of this car, it doesn't really make sense to repaint the part, so we will just give it a good polish. The parking sensors are also looking very good, with no corrosion, and this is about as good as it gets for a 65 plate car. On the other side, the bodywork looks pretty good again. No scuffs on the left rear wheel, but if you look really closely, you can see that there are bits of corrosion starting to appear from around the BMW logo in the middle. Now, considering that the rest of the wheel is absolutely spotless, we will leave it as it is, because there are only limited times you can do the refurbishment, because you're essentially removing thin layers of the material from the front, so at some point you will need to swap to a new wheel. As I said, rest of this side all good, no wobbly wing mirrors, a BMW windscreen, so that's all good as well. And as you can see, we already got started working on the car, because this is the dolly wheel. We use this just to move the cars around when the actual wheels are off, and this one was pretty scuffed, so we already sent it off for refurbishment with the previous batch. And lastly, if you look at the bonnet, it's pretty difficult to see now because it started drizzling, but there are a few scratches on here. We will see whether we manage to get those polished out or whether we will need to repaint the bonnet. Before I jump in, I maybe should have showed a bit more of the spec of the car. So as you can see, we've got the anthracite silver paint with the upgraded 19-inch turbine wheels, DC rapid charging, the parking package with the front and rear parking sensors, automated parallel parking, and the rear view camera, comfort access, and on the inside, the lodge interior, Harman Kardon speakers, professional media pack with the large sat-nav screen, heated seats, pretty much all the goodies. Speaking of heated seats, you may notice that the driver's seat is different. That's because, just like the previous car, the heating element in this seat broke just a couple of months ago, so we already had it refurbished, and in the meantime we just put this spare loft seat in. Just like most 40,000 mile cars, The driver's side door still started dripping where your legs would come into contact, so we will replace that as well. The steering wheel is in a very good condition. Many people are scared of these light colored steering wheels, but as you can see, no issues. This is just about the only mark you can see, and it's very minor, so no problems there. If you look very closely, the seats have a bit of water staining on them, but this is all fine. It comes out with a wet vac. And in fact, if you want a bright interior, the Lodge is a very good choice, because unlike the Loft, the leather on this one wears much better, and you can see that it still almost looks brand new. One slightly unusual issue we will need to deal with is this phone holder. It's in a very good spot, and I left it in since basically I bought the car about 2 years ago, but now it seems like it has fused with the glass, so we'll probably need to scrape it off carefully. I suppose I can also note that this is the slightly revised version of the 60 amp hour i3. It's not an official facelift, but there were a couple of part changes, like for example there is no longer the wrist pad in the center console, or for example the net you used to get was replaced by this storage strap. And lastly, if I turn the car on, we can ignore these tire pressure warnings, because that's all to do with the dolly wheel not having the TPMS sensor in it. So as I was saying, the last thing is if I run the windscreen washers, the windscreen washer fluid exits at a very low pressure. Now, because it's still coming out fine and you can hear the pump working, that means that the pump is most likely okay. There's a screen filter installed just before the pump to make sure that no blockages happen, and that's most likely clogged. So we will need to take the reservoir apart and make sure to clean that out properly. I think I covered pretty much everything. So now when it finally stops raining, it's time for the wash, interior clean, and then we will put the car up on a ramp to look underneath. Okay, so from now on the car is in the hands of our valeter. First we pressure wash the car to get rid of most of the dirt. While we are at it, we also spray out the door sills, but seriously, only try this at home if you know what you're doing with the pressure washer. Given the front boot is open and still quite dirty, this is a good opportunity to solve the issue with the windscreen washers. To get to the washer fluid reservoir, we need to remove the front container. That reveals the pump, and once that's out, the fluid should normally come pouring out. Hence, that's a clear indication of the fact that the filter needs to be cleaned. It simply pops off, and as you can see, there's a lot of gooey build-up. So we just rinse it off, put everything back together, and the windscreen washers are back to how they should be. Going back to cleaning the car, we use a pretty traditional 2-bucket wash to minimize scratches, so working from the top to bottom, with a different mitten for the wheels and the lower matte plastic panels. Speaking of wheels, we make sure to remove the brake dust from behind all of the spokes, and lastly, can't forget the details like the charge port and the frunk. Using the pressure washer again, we rinse everything off and dry the car with dedicated drying microfiber towels. This is England, so we had to move the car in quickly because obviously it started raining. We start working on the interior by removing the temporary seat. This gives us plenty of space to thoroughly vacuum the floor, then moving on to the rear seats, including underneath the rear bench. We managed to pull off the suction mount, but it left quite a bit of sticky residue, so we used a razor blade and a microfiber cloth soaked with tar remover to remove any last bits, and lastly polish with a window cleaner to make the glass look brand new. With the floor vacuumed, it's time to put the repaired driver's seat back in, and we can continue by vacuuming the boot. The floor mats we always take out, which makes the job a lot more manageable, and we freshen them up with the all-purpose interior cleaner. Stains on these bright seats are usually easy to tackle, because most often they are just water stains caused by leaving a wet bag or a jacket on the seat. We work the all-purpose interior cleaner into the wool with a brush, and subsequently it's sucked out with a wet vac. The important note to make is that the entire surface needs to be cleaned at a time and left to air dry, otherwise stains are going to reappear. So don't think about using the heated seats to speed up the drying process. With the big jobs tackled, it's time to turn attention to the details. cleaning the surfaces, buttons, storage areas and accessories using the all-purpose cleaner with a brush and a microfiber cloth to remove any stains. I know it may be scary to use a liquid product directly on top of electronics, but you have to keep in mind that these cars are built to operate in a very humid environment, or when you, for example, roll down a window and you get some rain onto the switches, the electronics have to be able to handle that without any issue. Lastly, we wipe down the frunk and replace all the little pieces, like the tire repair kit, the locking wheel nut and the towing eye. With the new parcel shelf in place now, that's the interior work finished. Before we move on to the machine polishing, I need to make one important disclaimer. We are not a detailer nor a paint correction specialist, so there definitely could be room for improvement, but at the end of the day, that's not what we are here for. Because now that we are inside with the car nice and clean, you can see that the previous BMW main dealer, which was Strutstone in Leeds, really could have done a better job with polishing the bonnet, because there's no way around it. There should not be this much ghosting on a 2015 premium car. To show you what difference a quick polish can make, we will section off the bonnet so you can clearly see the before and after. The polishing process is pretty standard, making sure to spread out the polishing compound first and then letting the machine do the work. It's important to know when to stop, especially on these i3s, because you don't want to end up warping these plastic panels. With the one half done, you can see that the freshly polished section looks much more shiny and less cloudy than the rest of the car. We continue working through the other panels, paying extra attention to the problematic areas, like the boot lip and the scratched corner on the front bumper. One issue which I forgot to point out in the walk around is that there are some light scuffs on the matte plastic cladding on the front bumper. This probably happened when someone was parking close to a curb, and it's not really visible, but it can be definitely made better with wet and dry sanding the area. With the car looking fantastic and shiny, it's time to turn our attention to the mechanicals to make sure that there are no hidden surprises. A good starting point is to plug the car into the official BMW diagnostics system and go through any fault codes. All of us were quite surprised that only 8 codes came up. This may sound scary, but there is nothing wrong with the car. It simply logs every event which could be of concern, including things like issues communicating to the charging station, even if the charging station is faulty, low battery in the key fob and so on. While we are here, we can also check the state of health of the 12-volt battery. The data shows that the battery has gone through a lot of cycles, but there's still plenty of capacity left in it, so we will leave it for now. And unlike some other warranties, our in-house EV warranty actually covers the 12-volt battery as well, so in case that fails, we will replace it without any cost to the customer. With the software check done, we move the car onto the ramp, because still nothing replaces physically looking at the condition of the components. The good news is that the only thing which requires work in this case are the gaiters. There are many ways of going about the process. We take the wheels off and now you can see that the gaiters are actually much worse than they looked from the outside, and remove the bolts holding the top mounts in place. The whole shock assembly can tilt outwards, which gives us enough space to compress the spring and remove the top part of the assembly. Now we simply remove the remains of the old gaiter, replace it with a new one and reverse the process to put everything back together. Even though it may not look like it, there is quite a bit of risk involved with this job. It's all down to the bolts holding the top mount in place inside of the wheel arch. Especially on older cars, they can start to rust, or we see them frequently over-tightened in case the gaiters had already been replaced before or aftermarket springs have been installed. In our case here, we have to be very careful, slowly trying to turn the bolt at a time and applying lots of WD-40 with the aim to loosen it without any damage, because the moment it shears, it becomes a 2-week ordeal where we have to get an external specialist in to remove the sheared leftovers. While we are here, we also give the parts a good clean, namely we wipe down the springs to remove any dirt buildup, as this could lead to excessive corrosion long term, and similarly clean off the top mounts, as it seems like there is a chemical interaction happening between the two neighboring parts, which leads to this powdery substance forming. We've already covered replacing of the door seals in a previous video, So now it's time to put the refurbished wheel back on and complete the work on the car by replacing the wiper blades as they were skipping. They're very simple to change, just remember that if you want to do it on your own, the wipers need to be in service mode. I know it may seem like we left out the corroded disc brakes, but trust me, this is totally normal. They only look so rusted because we did not wipe them immediately after washing the car, but you will see in the final beauty shots that even using the brake while moving the car around the showroom is enough for the superficial rust to come off. Speaking of the beauty shots, we can now cue some music and look at the finished article. Hopefully you liked the results, because we think that the car has cleaned up very nicely. But now the part you have all been waiting for, the cost breakdown. Despite this time around only having one page of items, and from the outside perspective, outside of the couple of niggles which I knew about, the car looking almost ready to sell, it still has incurred about £500 of direct material costs to prepare it to our standards. If you wanted to get the same things done on your car here at Wisely, the total would come out to about £1,200 including VAT. And all of that is before even mentioning the fact that the car comes with a warranty, which needs to be budgeted for as well, bringing value in the range of hundreds of pounds. I thought I would conclude this video from the freshly prepared car, but as you can see, I am in a different example with the dark interior this time around, and that's because my car had already sold to a lovely lady in the time it took us to put this video together. So that's the one thing I would like to make clear, that especially now with how low everybody is on stock, if you are looking for an i3, definitely get directly in touch with us, because we can send you a stock list with all the cars which are still undergoing preparation, and you may be able to choose one which has not made it to Auto Trader yet. That's how a significant portion of our stock sells these days. If you found the video useful, please consider subscribing, because we have a lot more i3 and EV content coming in the near future. For example, based on the feedback from this video, we may go a bit more in depth yet again and show you exactly which cleaning products we use on the interiors of these i3s, given they are so different to many other cars. But that's it for today. Thank you very much for watching, and see you in the next one.